anyone familiar with my earlier video on how to paint a candle flame, you'll know that I'm doing a series of tutorials on how to actually paint fire in various different states, sizes and sort of different forms. On this tutorial I'm going to be focused on a similar kind of flame to the candle flame, the candle wick flame, but this is actually going to be a matchstick flame. Now in some ways it has some similarities to the candle wick flame, but there are definitely some factors that will be a little bit different. As you can see here, I've got rough kind of templates of burnt out matchsticks, or at least part burnt out matchsticks, because I'm going to be adding flames to them. But they are from different sort of angles. So you've got one that goes straight up, one on its side, and then one at a sort of 45-degree angle. Fire tends to want to go upwards, and obviously that is going to make a difference to how it interacts and how it behaves according to these three different matchsticks. I'll just give you a bit of a rundown of the colours and the brush type that I'm going to be using for this tutorial and give you some of the reasons why. In terms of the actual brush itself, I'm going to be using a soft airbrush. The reason for that is that when you look at a flame, the transitions and the sort of blending of colours and tone is very, very smooth. If you were doing more of a sort of impressionistic painting, then I guess maybe more of a sort of artistic style brush might suit if a painting or a picture is like that consistently all over. But I'm going to be using airbrush because I wanted to make a picture look more sort of like a photograph, really. Try and go for as realistic as possible to what you actually see with your naked eye. So the soft airbrush is going to be perfect for that. Now in terms of the colours, I have actually pre-selected a range of colours. I'll just run you through them. I'm actually going to make this colour palette available for anyone that supports me over at Patreon, as well as the sort of full layered Photoshop file. Now I know this is not Photoshop, it is Procreate, but I think Photoshop is one of those programs that most people have access to, and therefore it's a really good way of just examining the different layers. And also you can open Photoshop files within Procreate as well. So the actual colours themselves, I've got a range of colours. I've got a sort of a deep, rich blue. It's not quite indigo, but it's definitely on the sort of the extreme end of the blues. Then I've got a sort of lighter version of that, maybe pulled back slightly. A greeny sort of aqua kind of colour, a bright red, quite a rich red, a sort of almost a primary orange, a sort of rich, I don't know, cadmium yellow, I don't know, something like that. It's hard to say here. I'm not used to using the technical names. If I was using oil paint or acrylic paint, I'd probably know the names of it, but I'm trying to describe it. It is sort of a rich yellow, and then more like a straw, almost whitey yellow. I probably will use a white in there, but I don't see it's necessary to add white as a colour on the palette. And there's also a sort of pinky, purpley sort of colour there as well. Now some of them are going to be used a bit more than others, but you'll see that as I go along. But the first colour I'm going to choose is going to be the sort of the richest, darkest blue. For anyone that saw the candle wick tutorial, will know that this is the colour that I started with on that particular tutorial. And it's going to be much the same sort of beginnings of this one. Now I'm going to start off with a separate layer. So I'm going to create a layer above the actual candle. Oh, sorry, I get mixed up. The actual matchstick. And I'm going to start my blue layer on top of that. Okay, so on this layer, I'm going to then choose the brush size. I want to turn the opacity of the brush way down. So you'll probably not even be able to see it there. Obviously, if I turned it up, you'd see it, but I don't want it to be very visible at all. I'm going to build this up very incrementally. So it's going to be very subtle, very slight to begin with. And then it's over, by going over and over it, that the effect will gradually increase. So I'm going to start with this sort of upright match, and much like I did with the candle wick flame, the blue appears at the bottom. Now in terms of where to start the flame on the matchstick, then it would start at the point, I mean it depends on the particular state of the match. If it's freshly lit, then the blue would start off near the tip of the matchstick there, but it would always be wherever the sort of burning has got down to. Obviously at the start of the burning of a match, then it's only the top area, but as it gradually sort of burns down, then wherever the black sort of charcoal area ends or begins, however you want to look at it, that's where the blue sort of starts as well. So to begin with, I'm just going to have it sort of kicking out from this area. It's probably not going to be as sort of rounded or as wide as the candle wick flame. And it's going to be less stable as well because it's going to be a bigger sort of flame as well. It's getting a bit fiercer really, compared to the candle wick one anyway. So that's the way I'm going to start it. Now I'm going to just, in the same way I did with the previous tutorial, I'm going to sharpen up and intensify the blue as it gets near the edges here. And like I've explained previously, this is a similar sort of effect that you might see, say, on an atmosphere around a planet. So as it gets towards the edge here, then you tend to get a more intense version, and then it softens up as it goes sort of further inwards. Now, I'm going to choose another layer, and I'm going to turn to a different colour at this point. So I'm going to turn to the orange. I'm not going to use the red for the actual flame. It's too strong a colour really. The red is for another area which I shall show you later on. I need to turn the brush up somewhat in terms of size, and then I'm placing it inside of the blue. So I'm only building it up slightly, and then as it goes up, it may sort of kick out a little bit around the match head, and then it sort of goes up a bit more as well. So, I previously said I wouldn't really use the red, but just a hint of it is perhaps okay. It's not going to be the main colour used, but a little hint of it towards the top end, maybe slightly around the edges, is perhaps useful at this point. But I'm not actually using it as one of the dominant sort of colours. Okay, so just a hint there. I may even at a later point erase some of that back a little bit. It may well be a bit too powerful. So we'll move forward from this point anyway. I'm going to create yet another layer. And I'm now going to turn to the lighter sort of end of this. So I'm not quite at the almost white yellow, I'm at the sort of straw yellow or cadmium yellowish. This is, again, built up very gradually. It's going to feed up into that area. It's not going to work this properly until we get a lot of the kind of brightest colour in here, almost white. But you've got to start adding a sort of foundation of yellow, and then you can go over it with the white and it adds a lot more depth. You'll notice that although the blue starts off on the outside to begin with, it ends up being sort of overtaken and overshadowed, as it were, by the yellows and the oranges. May wish to just slightly tweak a bit more orange in there. Turn the opacity down. Brush up slightly. I want to get a little bit more orange in the mix as well. Not going to make a massive difference, but just a little bit. It's all about subtleties when you're painting fire. If you try to be too heavy-handed with any of the elements, then it's just going to overpower the mix, really. Okay, I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to switch to the brightest sort of end of the yellows. And I'm going to start mixing these in. At this point, this is when the sort of light of the the actual flame is coming into it, and this hopefully will start to make a bit more sense of the fire appearance. Again, building it in gradually. The reason I've done it all in different layers is that if I decide that after I've done the sort of first pass at creating this, that one of the colours is too overbearing or it's not smooth enough, then I can easily go onto the layers and I can change just that one element without ruining the whole picture. If I decide that I do want to affect more than one layer, then it's always possible to merge layers down and then affect the whole thing at once. If you're not sure how to use Procreate, then I will leave a link down in the description of a Procreate sort of tutorial. It's suitable for beginners, it's suitable for some people who perhaps have no experience of the program at all, and I give a very, very detailed step-by-step rundown of how to use this particular app. It's a fantastic app, and it's the only app that I will use these days to actually create art. It's a completely impartial opinion. I'm not paid or sponsored or anything by Procreate, although to be honest I think they should. I do so much plugging of their app, but no, I'm not associated with the company at all. I just happen to think it's a particularly good app, one that I always turn to when I'm looking to create. Now, I said I would use some actual white. Now I'm going to do that now. Again, I'll put that on a separate layer, just so I can affect it independently of everything else. So I'm going to go back to the yellow layer. If I just remove it there, you can see which layer I'm talking about. I'm going to go back to the yellow, and I'm going to try and intensify that aspect a little bit more. I feel like the yellow needs to be a little bit stronger here. Now, although I'm showing the flame in various different states, there's no right and wrong. I mean, it depends at which point you catch the actual flame. It may be at different stages, then it behaves slightly differently. I'm just trying to convey one of those stages, okay? So if you caught it right at the beginning, it may be more like an explosive kind of flame to begin with, but as it goes down, you'll find it gets more stretched and sort of pointed upwards. You'll find the more traditional sort of rounded flame on the sideways one, but we'll get to this. For this one, seeing as it's burning quite down, it tends to come more to a point at the end. I can even then, with the smudge tool, I might change the smudge tool to be more of a medium brush. I can then go onto one of the layers and just encourage it to really pronounce the sort of effect of it dragging up, so it becomes more of a kind of whoosh as it goes up there. And I think I want to do the same with the yellow. Just feed it up a little bit, so you're really getting a sense of upward movement from the flame. And I still feel that's a bit intense. I may subdue that at a later point, but you know, you have to sort of find your way a little bit with these kind of elements. Now, another factor that I'm going to introduce is the actual matchstick itself, or the sort of the burning wood. Now, it's black here, but it wouldn't be totally black because there's various different things impacting it as well. Now, it wouldn't be totally black because there would be a light source. Depending on whether you're in a lit room, there might be a light source hitting the top of it. The actual flame itself is going to affect it, and then you also get the glowing sort of red aspect of it as well. Now, to begin with, I'm going to, like I say, choose a separate layer, and I'm going to put it way down underneath. So on this layer, I'm going to choose the colour red. I'm really going to go for the sort of deepest red that I can get, to be honest. And I'm going to then introduce, I need to be careful how I do this. I want to make sure I'm on the right brush. So we go back to the brushes. Yeah, okay. I'm going to sharpen it up slightly by reducing the size of the brush and intensifying the depth of colour. And I'm going to start just feeding in fact I might do it a bit more gradually. Start feeding in some sense that parts of the wood are burning hot, like this. Obviously this is going to vary. It may be that you hardly get anything depending on which side of the matchstick that you're looking at, and then on the other side you might get quite a lot of red. I feel like I've done a bit too much there, so I'm going to go back a little bit. It's easy to overkill. So I feel a bit happier with that. Maybe just create a little bit of a break here. That looks a bit more natural. But also, as well as the red, you may also get, in fact I may go on to the yellow, but grade up slightly because I want it to look like it's sort of becoming like ash. So it may be the flame that's actually affecting it. But it could also be the light source in the room that's affecting it too. So I'm just creating some sort of highlights along the top of the actual match head. So it's getting impacted by the light at the side, but also perhaps creating some texture sense that the light in the room is impacting upon it as well. And you could also perhaps just give a suggestion that it's also slightly affected the sort of black down here as well. Turn the opacity down, and brush size up slightly, and I'm going to just sort of fill this area a bit more, make it a bit more exaggerated, as such, like that. Now so far I've shown you the colours from the side, but you have to bear in mind that flames are not flat, they are 3D, so they will go all sides of the actual flame. So I've created a sense of a very flat version of it, but I also want to go back onto all the layers now, and when I say all, I think I'm going to concentrate on the yellows. I don't want to perhaps overshadow with too much of the orange, but I am going to use the yellows of both the light and dark. I'm going to turn the opacity way down, turn the brush size up, but I want to just go over the top of this a little bit. I'm going to start, perhaps just turn it back up a little bit, going over here so that I'm knocking back. So you can see now that especially the lower bit, less so on the actual round bit because it's wider and it will protrude slightly out of the flame, but the thinner part is going to be sort of submerged within the flame somewhat. In fact, I may go back onto the orange slightly. I may just, again, use a bit of the orange just to almost bury it slightly within the orange. And such, maybe just a smidge of there at the top as well. And I think what I need to do now that I've done that, and now it feels more submerged, I'm starting to feel like the burning wick of or the burning matchstick needs to be a bit stronger on the reds in there. I just really want to get the sense that it's really deeply hot and sort of glowing in there. I need to turn the brush size down slightly. Turn the opacity up. Maybe turn the richness of the red up just slightly. In fact, so what I may do with that is make another patch of red here. It's a slightly deeper red. Like that. I think that that's starting to feel like it's glowing more. And what I may do, in actual fact, is use some of the orange just to give it a sense that even within the red it's getting in little areas that are reflecting the light and just reflecting back a little bit more. If anyone's seen my lava tutorial, you'll notice that it's a kind of a similar sort of effect to that. So you get the sort of dark reds, and then within that you get oranges, within that you get yellow. There's kind of like a similar kind of techniques and patterns tend to crop up along the way. Now, There's an element that I've not done yet, and I'm going to create a new layer for this. And this is when the sort of almost the kind of aqua colour comes in. And you can see here it's just towards the greener end of the blue spectrum. And with this new layer, I'm going to make sure that it's above the other layers, even above the white layer there. Now I need to be careful with this, it's very easy to overdo additions like this, so I just need to turn the opacity way down to sort of 2 or 3%. I want it to be a very soft sort of addition here. In fact, I may turn the size of the brush up so it fans out even more and it's more of a gradual. So I want the kind of double effect of the blue here, so there is the initial rich blue, but I'm also creating a sort of a slightly lighter blue in here as well. I'm going to sort of spread it out at the sides there a little bit, like that. I feel like maybe I want to just slightly intensify it towards the bottom end. Too much. Do it more gradually, like this. Maybe increase the brush size slightly. There you go. And it's going to go in front again of the black of the matchstick. I can also feed it generally into this lower area. So it's really starting to feel like it's surrounding the actual stick of the match now at this point. And then as it goes up, it sort of fades out and you won't really notice it, like that. In fact, when it gets towards the top end, as it sort of fades out the blue, that's when I'm going to introduce just slightly some of the pinky purple. Again, it's going to be very, very subtle this. I only want it to be sort of a hint of it, too much in fact. So I'm going to reduce the opacity. I'm going to just feed it in slightly. Again, not all flames are exactly the same. Sometimes you will find that you don't really get this kind of colour feeding through, and that's fine. Other times you do. I'm not happy with that. I'm going to take that all back, go back to my layers. I'm going to make it as a separate layer. I forgot to do that. It's so easy to do. You get carried away with something like this and you forget to break it down into its elements. So I've created a separate layer for it. I think I'm actually going to scrap that colour. I did preset it, but I'm not quite happy with it now. I'm going to make it slightly deeper here, and then I'm going to put it back as that. And I think that will probably work a little bit better than so I need to use less of it, and I should get a more intense version of it. Just coming in a little bit here, just coming in a little bit there. Again, I might increase the brush size so it's less pronounced. Like so. I feel that's too strong. So what I'm going to do with the layer, is I'm going to go to the opacity. I'm going to turn that down so it's still there, but it's a hint of it rather than being too strong. Digital formats are wonderful, that you can adjust it as you go along at any point. Now I'm just going to, I feel like this area is not really satisfied with that, so I'm going to go back to my sort of whitest yellow layer. I'm going to go back to the white colour. I'm going to just introduce in slightly, make sure I've got the brush size, opacity down. I'm going to feed this up. Okay, I've not spent a lot of time actually adding anything onto this matchstick. It's very roughly drawn out initially, but you know, obviously if this was a proper painting, I would make sure that some of the details were on here that needed to be on there. So there might be some extra sort of texture of the wood. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm just really concentrated on the actual burning match head. So the actual flame is what's important here. It's just one version. You may find that They're all different ways of showing a burning match on its upright position. Maybe at certain times, if it's an earlier burning match and it's only just started at the top, you may get more of a rounded sort of end at the top, so they'd be more like the actual burning candle wick. But that's generally the kind of effect. Another option that you can actually use is to blur some of the layers. You can actually smoothly smudge things together and blend things together with the actual smudge tool, or another way of doing it is with the opacity. Is with the Gaussian blur rather. If you use the Gaussian blur, the slight word of caution of this, it blurs in every single direction, so you'll tend to find, I'll show you on a particular example here, if it was to decide that I wanted to blur this sort of yellow spike, and then I go into Gaussian blur and blur it, you'll notice that it widens there, if you can see the effect. So it spreads it completely. So you need to use it sparingly. In certain areas it's fine, but actually at other times the smudge tool might be a bit better. So for example, if I just show you really close up, when you get close up you can see that it's not particularly smooth. So generally speaking, that's not going to be an issue depending on the size of the picture you're actually doing, but for most sort of pictures you just smooth it according to the general viewing point of view. But now it's super zoomed in and using the smudge tool, much like you might be able to do with real, say, oil paint, you can actually smooth it in, and you can do that just to one layer at a time if you want, or you could merge all the layers together and actually do them as a whole bunch together. Now that I've zoomed in, I tend to get a little bit obsessive, so I'm not so happy with some of these edges. Seeing as I'm here, I could really fine tune this. I could start to add more details. In fact, I could go to the real reds here and start adding some little highlights in amongst, maybe around the edges here. So whenever you get the sort of the edge of something burning, it might just be really fiercely glowing red right on the very edges, such as this. I get little blobs and details that are more of an intense red than others. So the danger of digital really is that because you have the capacity to keep zooming in, you can get overly obsessed with a tiny detail and really you can get lost in the perfectionism. But it's useful, certainly. So you can see I'm really adding some little extra sort of blobs of what would be intensely glowing, and then I go to the orange and maybe just give it a sort of center point here just to really brighten up that effect. If you've ever looked at a photograph of things like matchsticks when they're super close up, because obviously your naked eye can't see this kind of detail, but if you've ever checked out what a burning match actually looks like close up, it is rather fascinating. There's worlds within macro sort of views of things. Okay, I could go on, but I don't want to get too carried away with that, and actually the effect is starting to look a bit too strong there, perhaps. And again, another aspect of digital is that you want to keep zooming back out, zooming back in. If you're not happy with it, then you need to obviously undo, don't you? Now on Procreate, it's a bit of a laborious process. You can actually just erase on that layer, but if you just want to go back a few steps, then you have to keep sort of double tapping as one of the erase techniques. Double finger tap, tap, tap backwards, and it'll start to undo a lot of the things that you've just done. So I do want to keep some of the things I've done, but I got a bit carried away there. So anyway, I think I'll leave it there for now. There is going to be a part 2 and a part 3 to this tutorial. We're going to cover some similar ground, obviously, but the general effect is going to be a little bit different. If you've enjoyed this part, please subscribe. The other 2 parts should be along fairly soon. I may even do them as one video for the second 2. See how we go. Thanks again to the early patrons that I've received on Patreon. Fantastic support. I'm going to continue to provide extra value for those people over my Patreon page who actually offering me that support. Can't thank you enough. It's immensely motivating for me personally, and I hope to produce lots more really valuable really useful tutorials and actual artwork as well. Thanks very much for watching. I shall catch you next time.